I'd rather create something that others criticize than create nothing and criticize others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like a weapon.
It's not about the figures. It's about who those figures are.
The Hospopreneurs Podcast.
I'm going to drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson.
After growing up around hospitality in the United States, Gibran Baydoun had different aspirations to change the world through politics. But instead of going to grad school, he wanted to work and ended up landing his first management job at 21. Fast forward to now, and his career has taken him all over the world, with companies like the Hillstone Restaurant Group, Ralph Lauren to open the Polo Bar, Momofuku as the Director of Restaurant Operations in New York, Marina Bay Sands, and now, through his own consultancy in Singapore, he's currently working at 1880. I am excited to share this episode. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the show, Gibran.
Hey, how's it going?
It's great to have you on, and I'm looking forward to getting into the episode today.
Greetings from Singapore.
Thank you. Greetings from Brisbane. It's amazing that we can do this. The first question, as you know, I like to ask is, what is your crazy hospitality story?
That's a tough one. I've had some crazy stories that I pulled off, but I think the biggest thing that pops in my mind for hospitality is kind of the story that I think changed it all for me. And it's actually a story I got as a receiving. I was living in New York at the time, and actually I had moved out of New York. I was living in Denver. I came back to New York, and I decided to meet my friends at Shake Shack, which is Danny Meyer's kind of fast food joint. At the time, it was only one location in Madison Square Park. It was right after Christmas. It was freezing cold. My friends stood in line for about over an hour, maybe hour and a half. I ditched the line to go to my old restaurant and see my team and see my colleagues, and I ended up spending a little bit too long there. And when I got back, they'd ordered a burger for me, and it was sitting there, and it was outside in the heaters, but it was already cold even minutes after coming off, or probably about 10 minutes after. So I decided to go and ask them just gratuitously at the rare chance that they might be able to heat up the burger or throw it in a microwave. And the guy told me, "I'm so sorry, but unfortunately for that burger, we can't reheat it." I said, "No problem. It's no fault of yours, all my fault." And I came back and I sat down, and within minutes, he brought out a fresh burger and fries. And I bring up that story because it actually just changed the way I viewed hospitality as a whole. Because at that moment, this guy who was, a line level employee making whatever an hour took it upon himself to not say, "Oh, I'm right, you're wrong," or "Oh, not our fault, not my problem," and didn't go and have to get a manager's approval and, as we do in the industry, sign off a form and all of that. He just made it happen. He knew that my bite of that burger was not going to be great, and just brought out a fresh one without even thinking twice. The timing in which he did that was just so impressive. And I think from then on, I never thought I could learn a lesson from really a fast food joint, but that was probably the greatest moment of hospitality I've ever received. Ultimately, it kind of influenced my decision of doing things my whole career, honestly.
Yes, really. And obviously, you'd been in the industry by the time you had this experience as well. So, how did that then influence the way that you moved beyond that?
Well, at the time I was, overseeing a restaurant, and I've been looking after a few, I think it was my kind of second or third restaurant with the same company. But at the time, I think it made me change the way I thought about making those kind of moments for guests. Oftentimes, it's easy as the manager to feel like, "Oh, okay, I'll come in and save the day," because typically that's what we're called on to do, right? And if it gets to us, we know something's usually gone wrong. But in that case, it changed the way I thought of it. I flipped it upside down and said, I just hope that every place I worked, that my dishwasher, my bartenders or servers, waiters, no matter who they were, had so much agency and so much ownership that they felt like the culture of this place that hopefully I've had a little role in helping create, this culture would be so ingrained that they wouldn't have to think even a second about what to do, and didn't think a second about how much it costs or even how much or how it got rung in, but just knew in that moment what to do. So it made me think a little bit holistically about the team, maybe think a little bit about what kind of people we hire and how we motivate. And it's really been something that's been in the back of my head ever since.
That's fantastic. I guess then the next question I like to ask after this, it's a great segue into it, is why you do what you do, and has that changed in your time in the industry?
Totally. I never thought I'd be doing this, to be honest with you. When I went to college, and I actually grew up in Las Vegas, and so I was around hospitality all the time. My mother's loosely in the hospitality business or been in food service, but I kind of went as far away from politics. I thought I'd go into politics and I'd go change the world, but I kept getting drawn back, and I kept getting brought back to, I think, where I'm meant to be. I had a mentor early in my career who told me, Brian, you're going to go into hospitality. And I said, there's no way. But I think I do what I do because it just fits. It just works. I think oftentimes we as people try to force ourselves into doing something maybe that has, quote, better hours or maybe better work-life balance, or if we feel like it's what we should be doing, right? At this point in my life, I should be doing this. But for me, I started to say, I do this because it's where I can make an impact in the world. It's where I feel like my best traits and even my worst traits get used in the best way possible. So it's funny to laugh about now. I can't even imagine doing anything else.
So when you say your best traits and your worst traits, what do you mean when you think about that about yourself?
Don't you feel like sometimes I look around all the chefs that I work with and bartenders and the team, I look around and I go, man, we're just crazy. Like we're crazy, you know. There has to be some type of mental imbalance in us that makes us do what we do, right? I mean, take a chef who comes in at 7 o'clock in the morning and literally is prepping food and making food all day. And I'm always fascinated by chefs, and there's some of them are so like anarchists, and they're fighting so hard and screaming over a julienne vegetable to kind of make it right. And that to me is magic. And the fact that we do this again and again and do this on purpose as serving people and serving food and feeding people, we have to have a little bit wrong with us. And so I don't know. I think my best traits is the idea that I like being put through the ringer. I like the fact that no 2 days are the same. And I like a boxer kind of dancing on their feet and responding to another person's move. And, I think it's a unique breed. It's a unique breed of us. That's for sure.
It's interesting the analogy you just drew there from boxing, for example, and a lot in this industry is like a dance. And I think of conversation as a dance. A lot of it's artistic. This is the art of the industry. There's the science, but there's the art of the industry, and that's that dance. That's that part of what we do and why it's so exciting, because you get to express yourself through experiences, through conversation, through this product service that you can provide to each and every guest, and then finding very quickly what someone wants and being able to deliver that. And not just that, but something I've brought up in another episode is this: not just giving someone what they want, but giving something they didn't expect that they wanted. That is the ultimate thing we can provide for someone, I personally believe, because then they're surprised and they like it even more.
It's like almost a translator. And that's what I find, especially in front of house. That's really what our job is. It's translation services at its finest, right? It's taking what someone tells us, which might not be what they need or what they want, and finding a way of translating and then articulating that into how we're going to obviously change their experience and make sure they have a great day and a great meal. But even beyond that, because to me, it's not about the visit that they're there. The moment someone walks into my restaurant or to a bar or, a bar that I'm working or a restaurant or whatever, the moment they walk in, I feel in a way, the sales in a lot of ways, it's done, right? You've sold something. You might not sell as much as you could, but you've sold something. But to me, I think about it as the second they're in, all I'm thinking about is the next visit. How every decision we make is ensuring their next visit. And a lot of that comes from just trying to listen, understand, and then translate for everyone that needs to know it, whether it's chef, the bar, or themselves, about how to really articulate and read out that situation and then convert it. That's the real magic of it. And even a lot of us in the business sometimes don't get that. And we think so much about ourselves. And we're translating, what do they always say? Treat someone how you would want to be treated. Well, I don't know if that's right in our business. We need to treat someone how they ought to be treated, not necessarily how we want to be treated, right? And I think that's the real fine dance. I like that analogy too, that you said dancing is really where it's at.
So how do you then, there's a lot that you said in that answer there, but one part I want to hone in on is, how do you then develop those skills to be able to read people quickly, in your opinion? Is that just experience, or is there a way that you develop those skills?
It's easier some places than others. One gift or one brilliant thing and one thing I miss about New York is that those driving as hospitality, professionals and people in their business, most, at least in the great, restaurants and the bars, which there are many, a lot of them are your ideal guest as well. A lot of the servers go out to eat. I would go to my team all the time. Hey, where do I go for dinner tonight? And they would know. They would be the ones who are going to bars and they're enjoying it and they're understanding the nuances of what a great meal is. Now you take that to Asia, where what we're doing in this area is a little bit more challenging, where my team necessarily haven't dined at Gramercy Tavern, haven't experienced what it feels like to have your wine glass splashed upon arrival with champagne. It's not normal. And so for us, it is a bit of a challenge. How do we teach people or teach ourselves how to read a situation that maybe we haven't been in or that we couldn't even afford to be in? That took some learning curve. It took me going out, to be honest with you. It took me going out and using my days off for R&D, which was dining at Nomad and these fantastic restaurants throughout the world, and understanding and seeing and feeling and enriching. That's what it took for me. I needed to know what it felt like to be 4 people at a dinner table and having that moment between main course and dessert and being like, God, what I could use right now is just a little bit of pick me up or a little bit of alcohol to make sure this becomes a legendary one or we wrap it up, right? It took me being in those situations to really understand it. Not saying it's not possible, but I always try to go back to the greatest meals you've ever had. And when people tell you that, it's usually a very simple formula, right? It's food was always there, drinks were always there, things were proactive, things were intentional. And if we can hone into what that felt like, if I can ask a server or bartender to close their eyes and tell me what it felt like to even have their order perfectly made at Starbucks, I tend to be able to recreate that for, let's say, a very important guest who's here, on a business dinner.
So there's one thing, and this was the question there, is that there's one thing to learn it ourselves. We've worked in the industry, our eyes open as we have more experiences, we learn this art, but then how do you teach that? How do you train other people to do that, to identify it? Is it then funding their experiences or just hiring people who are proactive themselves to go and learn those things? Or is it a matter of a formula that you can teach people?
I wonder, I should know the answer because the main business of my business tends to be today really training and working with a lot of teams and consulting. It's doing just that. But for me, it's a combination of both, right? We want to find the right people. We want to find the people who do like to naturally go out or who can, in a situation, recognize. One of my favorite interview questions is always, describe the best meal you've ever had, or what was the last great meal you ever had? And some people feel this pressure to say a restaurant, but oftentimes it's, my aunt's house. She makes the best mac and cheese. And okay, what made it great? They'll talk about the fact, well, everyone was there, or it was outside in her garden and it was so beautiful because she had little fairy lights. Or someone recently said a meal where we had this giant pot and everyone kind of was serving themselves, and I served this person, they served me, and I said, okay, cool. Now we're really talking, because they might not know how that's going to translate to the 5-course tasting menu we're going to offer on New Year's Eve, but I know how it's going to translate. And just knowing that they can see it and feel it, that to me means they kind of have that hospitality gene. And I work with that any day. I prefer people without hospitality experience usually to hire. I love people who are just excitable people who are passionate. So I like that. And then from there on, it's just about culture and talking and painting a picture. And if we do that well enough, then typically a lot of the other issues will all come into place. Yes.
Tell me more about the hospitality gene.
Yeah, it's hospitality gene. It's like it's the guy at the table who sees, when you're with your friends and you notice someone's beer is empty and you go and you're the one who, while you're grabbing one for yourself, you grab someone else another. It sounds second nature. It sounds common sense, but it's not. There is someone that naturally does that. There is someone that doesn't. It doesn't make them a bad person. It's just something you haven't thought about. And I think it's that kind of selflessness. It's the idea of being generous, being someone who's quite concerned with the way others are feeling. Again, this is what I always say. It's my best traits and my worst traits, because at the same time, caring so much about what other people think or caring so much about how others feel over your own is not the best trait to have in life all the time. But it does make 9 times out of 10 for a really, really, really good hospitality person.
100%. I'd like to ask you more about, because we've jumped into a lot of topics that I like to get into a little bit later. Let's take a step back and go back to what you do and how you came to do it.
So currently what I'm doing in Singapore is I came to Singapore. I was working with a celebrity chef, David Myers, at his restaurant Adrift at Marina Bay Sands, which was an incredible experience. And now I still work with David on a global scale, looking after his restaurants in Dubai and Tokyo and helping work with him on a larger level. I also work with a few other restaurant groups and hotels in the region who are looking at everything from, I work on development projects, things from scratch, to things that are been up and running for a little while and need a little bit of a revamp or a little bit of life, or maybe just kind of had a launch but never really was firing and speed. And I help in kind of rethinking everything from menu strategy to oftentimes training, and most importantly, sometimes ambiance, from music to the feel, the space, to the uniforms, and to the way, the energy we need with the staff. And the other part of my job, which is also kind of part of that, is I look after something I'm quite passionate about, which is a private members club in Singapore called 1880. It's a real home for people who are curious, people who don't accept what just everyone says the world should work and want to talk about it. And so it's a private members club, but based on salon talks and panels, and do everything from take folks to go see the Dalai Lama in March, which we're doing, to have a salon debate on whether smartphones are making our kids dumber. But on top of that, we have 2 bars, a restaurant, ton of events. And so it's the idea that hospitality is working to fuel these conversations. It's kind of like my life's dream. I wanted to go into politics my whole life, and now I get to combine politics, or at least social change and social justice, with also great food and great drink and making people feel good. So
Yeah, that's very cool. Obviously, 1880 is something that takes up a substantial proportion of what you do. How do you then, is it a matter of time management to be doing your consulting stuff on the side? And are businesses now at this point in your career, do you go in as a consultant, or are you hired by a business to be employed on a high level, or how does it normally work for you?
yeah, currently I'm working on the consulting model. Which is not always great. I don't think anyone ever wants to be a consultant. It's not fun having only a little bit of say, or you feel like you're kind of dating a restaurant. Like, I like to be fully in, and I'm naturally someone that takes a lot of ownership over things that I do. But it's a good balance. Yes, time management is key. It's just even about relationship management, about making sure you're giving enough attention and enough getting your hands dirty. But the key is not taking on too much, not taking on more than you can chew. I try not to take on things that I don't think will be successful or that are not really my style. I really want to take on projects or restaurants that I believe in and that I feel like I want to get my hands all over, and that I want to roll up my sleeves and really work with some of the talented people that are there. Those are the projects that I really look for. 1880 is technically one of them that I think naturally has become, because it's such a good fit. I do spend more time here, but also my company is based out of here. So a co-working space, and they are just an incredible supportive. I mean, it funds entrepreneurs. So that's been a really great aspect to it. So it's about the balance, and I like the thought that I could maybe make a difference or have an impact in not just one place, but many, and that I can inspire this culture of hospitality, this culture of giving and generosity and intentionality in more places than just one. That to me is what, at this place in my life, I'm all about.
Yes. So you explained there that obviously as a consultant, you're getting involved in a lot of projects. I'd like to keep the question broader, though. I don't want to funnel into that answer. My question is, how do you do that? How do you create an impact across a larger span within the industry? For
me, every project I've worked on, and I mean this in my career almost, every restaurant, I kind of developed a little bit of reputation, especially at the beginning of my career, that going to restaurants that maybe weren't doing so great or weren't really, where they should be, and kind of like, oh, cool, now we're doing wonderful and we've taken off, we lift off. And every time it came down to culture, to be honest with you. And so I find that the culture in the broadest way possible is the way that I'm able to have that impact. No restaurant needs me, in my opinion, to go in and be the guy who, well, actually some might, but most restaurants don't necessarily need me to come in and be the guy who's touching tables and really that hands-on. What they need is to have a team of people who are touching tables, a team of people who are hands-on, a team of people who are thinking that way. And so I like to work with managers. I love to work with people, young people in their career, to start with that culture. The same cultural moment I had when I was at Shake Shack and that guy brought me that burger without even thinking twice, if I can get that spirit in 3 people in a day or a week or a 3-month engagement or a 6-month engagement, if I can make that happen, then I've done my job. The best thing I can do with any client is get fired. The best case scenario, I'm fired. And that's what I want. I'm not looking for a 5-year consulting contract with anyone, at least today. What I want to go in and be fired. I want someone to say, Gibran, we don't need you anymore. We've accomplished these goals. This team gets it. They understand when to turn up the volume. They understand naturally when to bring down the lights. They understand naturally when to go out with a group of espresso martini shots for the 4 ladies at the bar, right? I want to be all over it and also not all over it at all. I want that culture to be in place. And that, if you can get that, then it doesn't matter about where you are or where you are in the world or whether you're in Tokyo or Dubai. If you could do that, that's what I think the secret is.
Yes. Gibran, I'd like to ask you what you're learning about or exploring right now.
So right now, the entrepreneur in me is bursting at the seams. It's burning really inside. And so right now, I'm really working at developing and building and kind of opening. I would like to open my own concept from scratch that's uniquely from this kind of crazy brain and combines some of the things that I've seen and done over the last 15 years of my life. That's where I'm at. And so because of that, what I'm learning about is what it really takes and feels like to be the person who's ultimately responsible for every ounce of that P&L, what it means for people to work for you and to be responsible for their salary. You always are that way as a GM or director of operations, but when you're the one who's putting yourself, your reputation, your own finances on the line, it becomes a lot more serious. And so right now, I'm so curious to meet with people who have started their own business, to meet with people who took the courage and jumped on the cliff and took that moment to jump. That is really interesting. That I want to know. I want to know what it took to do everything from get the architect or the lawyer to get the liquor license to how did you go from day one and say, all right, this is it. Let's open, right? I want to know what that feels like, and I want to know what that means as someone who's actually said, this one is mine. So that's where I'm really curious about. I mean, I just am so hungry for it. And the other aspect I'm really curious about is how do you motivate people who don't want to be there? How do you motivate that those team members or the people part of your family? Someone on your previous podcast said it's something like hospitality professional versus hospitality, people who are doing hospitality just until they do something else, either get through school or they're waiting for that finance job, whatever it is. How do you motivate that person? That really thrills me. I think that's what I'm still learning, especially in Asia, which is a lot different than being in the West. So that's really curious to me. Yes,
fantastic. And thank you for sharing that. Obviously, they're two things I'm incredibly passionate about myself, especially coming up with the word hospopreneurs fits that very closely what you've just described. You're interested in the hospitality entrepreneur. So in that learning, where are you then pushing things or innovating?
So I don't know if it's very innovative, but it seems to be as I dine out and talk to folks. But I believe in intentionality, hospitality on purpose, doing things on purpose. So instead of allowing things to come up for chance, how do you be so intentional down to the finest detail? And what I found when I talk to different entrepreneurs is you talk to thousands or hundreds or 50 at least. As I talk to those folks, I find that the ones that are most intentional, the ones that have decide and think about where the outlets are going to be and where the POS machines are going to be and how this chair makes you feel and how far away. I worked for a company that would never measure in terms of square foot, but they would measure how far the furthest table away is from where the hot pass is. Because that to them was the most important and an intentional measurement. Because if it was too long, the fries would be cold by the time they got there. Or if the server was on a double, that would make a lot of laps if that person got placed at the last table. That by the time they're taking care of their 8th table that day, they might be a little fatigued. That level of intentionality, I think, is the most innovative. And that's what gets my brain thinking. I'm not looking, okay, how can I reinvent the Negroni? But what I am thinking about is how can I make sure that the Negroni that we make, that recipe, that ingredient, that every single thing is so intentionally thought out and decided upon that we are going to make the most amount of people, or the most specific amount of people, very, very, very happy in a way that the decision's being made for you that you didn't even know was being made for you. So intentionality is everything to me.
In that intentionality, I feel like there's a deeper point that I'm getting from that. And it's this concept, I've mentioned this as well. There's this Italian word, and I'm going to mess this up again, but sprezzatura, which is this concept where there's simplicity that's the face of all this complexity. And I think that that's potentially what you're describing there, is that there's so much intentionality behind that.
I love it. I mean, my design style, even, or aesthetic, or even a lifestyle I personally like to live, is that of a minimalist. And I think it was Donald Judd, one of my favorite artists, who said, I'm not a minimalist, I'm a purist. And that it takes a lot more courage to intentionally put one dot on a canvas and leave it there and say that's the exact spot it's going to be, than it does to maybe put 1,000 dots, is one theory. I love the idea of being able to put such creative strains on yourselves and forcing yourself to make a decision that's going to have to be the most thoughtful. I'd rather wait and think about a restaurant for 5 years before we open, or 5 years before we change it, or put a cocktail on the menu, than just throw things to the wall and hope it sticks. Of course, the situation has to occur, and sometimes you're in that level. But when it comes to something along those lines, I look at restaurants that are doing it really well, and I say, why did you do that? And I think, why did they do that? And for others, why did you not think about that? That's where I'm at.
It's very interesting there, the way that you just described that, because the wait, the hold off approach is the total opposite of the American culture. Right. And obviously spending time in the States and learning, like honing your craft in America must have meant that will have rubbed off, right? Because they're very much like ready, fire, aim. It's this like do it and adjust.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a symptom of the time, because I did see, for a long time there, I found that, you would have chefs who spent a year and a half working for X, and next, it was like, boom, opening my own restaurant. And I wondered if that was a sense of the time. I find that's a little bit on the decline, especially in New York or London, where it was like new restaurant opening every week and new restaurant gone every week, right? You're opening and done in a year, 2 years. And one challenge or concern I have with Singapore, which I think is slowing, but for a while that was the case. A lot of leases in Singapore are 2 years with 1 year extension. So there's the idea of, what can go wrong? Yeah, we'll open this restaurant. Let's see if it works. Okay, it didn't really work out. Okay, we'll go for another year. We'll wrap things up. Okay, good. We're closed. Next. Who's next in line? And there's no repercussions. But for me, I'd rather be in a market where it has to work. We don't have a choice. Everything's on the line. So if that's the case, if those are it's like boxing about. I'm up against the ropes. If that's the choice, what decisions do we make then? I used to work for David Chang in Momofuku, and he tells a story so well about his second restaurant, Sambar. And how at first it was just not working. It was a Korean wraps, a little bit ahead of its time. And it just wasn't really firing. But he had to say for himself, I will do whatever it takes. And he says it. He's like, I would literally have sold drugs if I had to make sure that restaurant stayed open, because it would have lost his first restaurant and maybe his dad's house. And it was that type of desperation or vulnerability causes you to make very thoughtful and intentional decisions. Causes you to think twice. And so to entrepreneurs, I say the same thing. I love it when a guy's going off, as the baristas I work with and bartenders are going off to open bars, and there's, be 6 seats and bars and coffee shops and doing all these things. Fantastic. I hope they all succeed. But I wonder what that success could look like with 6 more months of just thought process and location analysis and menu testing and, really getting your pulse to what the market wants and what you need, and making sure the story you say is the most compelling story and not just the first story.
So how do you know? You can do as much research as, but I'm just providing an alternative argument here, devil's advocate. How can you know what the market wants if you haven't launched it?
Totally. Yeah, you're right. Maybe you don't, but I know that when you've considered something, we all do this. We all think about the best case scenario left and right. But have we ever sit back in a room and say, what happens worst case scenario? Even this for the smallest things, down to a dinner for 16. Have we ever said, oh, wow, this sounds great. This is amazing. Wow, this is going to be wonderful. Everyone's going to love it. Everyone's going to stand in line. Cool. But what happens when they don't? What does failure look like? I like failure. I'm not necessarily scared of it, but I am very thoughtful of it. And I think that failure sometimes can breed the greatest successes in the world. And I'm intrigued to be a part of that, not be a part of failure, but I'm intrigued to kind of face that challenge. But the question really is, do we spend too much of our time thinking about best case scenario and not enough time thinking about worst case scenario? And have people in your life that will tell you that sucks.
Now, maybe that mentality is because of the American influence that you're rejecting that American culture. Because in Australia, we have tall poppy syndrome, which is this concept where if you're doing too well, people want to chop you down. People want to keep you in line. And so we actually have the opposite, where there aren't enough people saying, yeah, you go and do that people are being discouraged all the time. Their dreams are quashed, right? So that's potentially that your cultural, upbringing that has, or like growth and an environment you've been in has potentially influenced that. So it's really interesting to hear that. But I'm super interested in the cultural effect and then the translation and the execution of hospitality through those different cultures as a result of that. My next question I'd like to ask you is, what innovations or innovative techniques have you seen in the industry?
So I'm loving the way technology is playing a role in kind of the way we work and the way we run things. So of course, training is always in the back of my head, and there's some really cool training platforms out there. We've become really fond in using Jerry, which is a really cool app that allows you to put all of your training materials on board and tests and all those things. We've found a lot of success with it. It's been a really cool, innovative way of taking what would have taken us, binders upon binders and thought process to get the communication and knowledge there. So I love Jerry. There's another app that's out there, a couple of friends might have developed, called Day Zero, which what Day Zero is all about is handling everything that happens before an employee starts in that day, how having all of those details worked out, whether it's paperwork they need filled out to when they arrive, do they know where their locker is going to be, or for some of these big hotels as well, do they know how to get along? Do they know where the staff area is? All those things. And with the proper onboarding, of course, you're going to retain employees better, and you're going to actually have a better network of people, and you're going to have people who are more engaged and feel more comfortable, able to start working right on up tack. So I love those innovations. I love that a lot of companies, big and small, are really pushing and investing in things like that. I think we can't get away from it. I tend to be an old-fashioned guy. I like to do good old-fashioned hospitality, do what's right for the people. I mean, how do you make someone feel just really freaking good? So I tend to reject a lot of the maybe innovative bartending techniques. I tend to reject sometimes a lot of the innovative, or I shouldn't say that. I don't tend to reject innovation. I love innovation. But what I do love, or what I do reject, is this idea that we all have to somehow subscribe to this idea of doing something new, right? We see it in hospitality or fashion. It's like, well, how do I do something new? How do I do something no one else has ever done before? There's some theories out there, I don't know if I agree with them, that everything has already been done, that it all has been done in the world, and that nothing is new. There is no creation. There's no innovation. I'm not sure if that's true, but I do believe we shouldn't spend so much time thinking about how you can be the most innovative or how we can be the most unique, and instead think about how can you tell a story that might be unique or special, and it might be in a technique that's been done before. So I'm not so concerned personally on inventing the next cronut, but I am really innovative on how do we tell the next cronut story, or how do we make people feel the way it felt the first time you bit into a cronut after standing in line for 4 hours. That I want to do. That is cool. That's innovative.
Yes. So in that, what innovations can you see taking place right now?
I guess the easiest answer I can say is the biggest innovation I see taking place now are all the problems that I think would give us headaches before are just kind of going away in a lot of ways because of technology. And so we're able to really focus on what really matters, which is guest time. I would spend hours sometimes mapping out a floor plan for the evening, which now can be done with software in 2 seconds, right? It's so funny how much time does a manager spend doing office work? To me, that should be at a minimal. And I think today it almost is at a minimal because it is a lot easier to cut checks for people. It's a lot easier to do, HR processing and all of those things. And I think those types of innovations actually make our jobs a lot easier. And I think we don't really think about those a lot. I like that we take reservations in a smart, thoughtful way, and that someone has designed an algorithm. Does it work all the time? Absolutely not. Does it sometimes take the human element out of it? Absolutely. I think a lot of restaurants today, I don't know if this trend has hit Australia, but a lot of restaurants in New York don't have someone you can call on the phone and get to at the restaurant when you're running late. That to me is a very bad innovation. I get the thought process that we have a hostess in the front when the phone doesn't make sense and it's a waste of time. But to me, that's a bad innovation. I want to be able to get in hold of someone and talk to a human when I'm running late or I need a quick change or it's a birthday, I need something, I want that aspect. I don't know if that's hitting your spot, but I don't know how many restaurants in New York just don't have the power. They don't have the opportunity to be able to take a phone call and discuss with a guest in the moment and let you know what the feel of the space is. So that to me is very disappointing. But what I do like innovation-wise, I can control the music at any restaurant from my phone from anywhere in the world. That innovation I will always get behind.
Yes. I mean, it's the human component is what makes, I believe, what makes hospitality. And without that human component, then what is it? It's robots, serving people. It's food dispensers and drink dispensers. So I agree. I totally agree. And I think that being people who are pioneering the next stage of the industry, I think we need to be aware of that. So I'm totally behind that as well. Obviously, you've dealt with a lot of competition throughout your journey as well. So I'd like to know how you handle competitors.
Do you mean competing businesses or competing people?
I would like you to take the question however you would like to take that.
Competition, yes, I do. I love it. I believe having more restaurants on your block, more people in the boat is good for everyone. What is a rising oceans, raised all ships, something along those lines?
Rising tide floats all boats, yeah.
I love it. I really do. I love it. I love seeing a restaurant succeed, even if it's a direct competitor. I love it. Because especially in markets where you're trying to maybe, I hate to use this word, but you're trying to kind of educate a clientele or get people in the habit of dining out, you want more restaurants. You want more people doing the right thing. Good restaurants doing good things to people because it just helps with this culture. Oftentimes, we would have difficult guest situations in Singapore because oftentimes they were so used to having what just wasn't great service that they would naturally start a situation assuming it's going to be bad because they're so used to having to maybe raise their hand to get a refill. And that to me now, I don't think that's the case anymore. There's a lot of restaurants where you do not have to raise your hand ever an entire meal, which has definitely changed over the last 5 years. Because of that, people now are a lot more relaxed. They're allowing the restaurant to have more control of their dining experience, to allow them to have more influence. And that's only because other restaurants are all getting on board. Other restaurants are all becoming proactive and intentional versus letting the guest, drive the whole experience. So competition to me is fantastic. Now, when it comes down to business and I have to distinguish myself from competition, I'm doing just that. I'm figuring out what are my assets and how do I say them as loudly as possible. I believe every restaurant, every business must have a story that's concise and consistent and say it as loudly and consistently as possible. It sounds simple, but it's challenging. At a Drift, we worked at Marina Bay Sands, which has 30 to 40 restaurants, and 30 to 40 very good restaurants, mind you. There's a lot of talented people, things there, a lot of talented people that work there. But we had to figure out a way of making a Drift, which is in a lobby of Tower 2, of one of the busiest hotel lobbies and most iconic hotel buildings. We had to figure out a way of giving it its own voice and its own culture and its own story with competition on both sides of us. And we're able to do that by choosing not to be the restaurant for everyone, but to be the best restaurant for a select group of folks.
For someone, yeah.
For someone.
Yeah. Someone who I follow a lot is Seth Godin. A lot of the concepts that you're describing are very similar to things that he says. I don't know if you're familiar with Seth Godin, but he is one of the most incredible marketers that I've ever followed. And there are a couple of concepts there that specifically that it's not to appeal to the masses, especially in this time where there are so many of these products that are available that has been taken. The homogenous product is out. Now we have to create niche products for niche people. The market is large enough to be profitable, to have a business model based off. And then another concept there is the purple cow. His concept he calls the purple cow, which is what you described, where a business should have its story that stands out, that sells it. And a purple cow is a gimmick that people want to talk about. And the sheer fact that people want to talk about it means that it's not a gimmick anymore. It's actually valuable. And so therefore it's a purple cow. people want to talk about it. And I think that that's that story that every business should have a story, should have a purple cow, find the purple cow for your business and use that, leverage that, because people are going to want to talk about a purple cow. So it's incredibly interesting hearing another perspective on it all. I want to go back to just the end part of the previous question and take another step beyond that. I asked what innovations are, you've seen that are taking place. What changes do you want to see take place in the industry?
There's a couple answers to that. Number one, I would like for our people to be taken care of. Whether it's chefs doing this now who are really thinking about mental health in the F&B industry, I think that's super important. I think we need to actually have a conversation about work-life balance. I think we need to have a conversation about how we reward and value. I mean, you guys are in Australia, you aren't dealing with the tipping culture, but back in the US, we tried to have that conversation on tipping and whether that's the right way of going about it and whether that's it. But I think we need to have a serious conversation where too many people are deciding I love F&B, I love making people happy, I love food, I love being a chef, or I love being a manager, I love being a bartender, but this is not going to be good for my family. And I think we have to figure out a way of, I think for so long we've been like, well, then F you, move on. Like, not for you, go work in a bookstore. But I think what we need to do is now start saying, how can we make this industry something that these great, talented people can still fulfill their dream, can still do what they want to do, and still also be a great husband or a great wife or a brother or a great mother. I think that's the part that will be our next reckoning. I think that's the next generation of restaurateurs, especially in a place, again, like Asia, where working in restaurants is not the sexy, glamorous job. To a lot of families, it's, you want to do what? Which we saw in the US 10 years ago or 20 years ago that now kind of got over that hurdle. I think that's the part where we need to do better of. We need to take care of our people. And in the end, they'll be able to take care of our guests. If we give them the hospitality that they deserve and give them the job and the space and the vehicle and the place to be creative and or at the very least just to execute and do things that they're passion, I think we'll be off to a good start. But that's what I would like to be a part of, that positive change that makes people have a great experience.
Fantastic. I want to ask you, Gibran, what's your creative process? How do you get into a creative state?
It's really simple. There's nothing brilliant about it. I mean, if I could call my company this, I would, but it's how does it make you feel? It's just at its core. And I literally ask myself that 1,000 times. I say it out loud to people 1,000 times a day. How does it make you feel? And this applies to everything. There's a Maya Angelou quote, people will not remember what you say or what you did. They'll remember about how you made them feel. And to me, that is everything. If I walk into the floor of the restaurant, the first question I ask, I almost want to close my eyes if it didn't make me look weird. But I almost close my eyes and be like, what does it smell like? What does it taste like in this room? What do I hear? Do I hear, laughter and clinking? Do I hear music? I do believe music. I am on the thing that music should be audible. It should be intentional. I believe in background music by any means, but that's my personal philosophy. It doesn't fit for every restaurant I've ever worked with, but those are the aspects I think we need to know. Does even in the space, last night was a Monday night and right after the holidays, it's kind of quiet. There's only a handful of tables in the restaurant. But when I walked into the dining room, I go, wow, it feels so good in here. It didn't need to be completely full to feel full and feel energy and feel that space. How are the staff making people feel? How do they feel? And how does it feel when going way back? How did it feel when I didn't call that person back after their second interview? How did that make them feel when I wasn't going to give them the job that I didn't even bother to give them a call? That's not cool. And so that's the big aspect that unlocks my creative process. When I'm tasting a new drink or we're developing a new menu, I'm like, all right, if I looked at this, what would this make me feel? When I looked at this menu, how would I feel? Would I feel like, whoa, I'm about to be hosed? Or would I feel like, okay, cool, I can have a lot of things here. I can buy a lot. I can get a lot of different items. Oh, okay, cool. I'm going for the Mac Daddy. Those are the questions I constantly ask myself. And then the next question is, okay, how can we make it better? So how does it make me feel? And then how can I just do it a little bit better? What can I do to make this a little bit different than how the next guy would do it? How do I touch this just one more time that distinguishes myself, or that someone says, oh, okay, this is a Gibran restaurant, or this is a Gibran menu, or this is a Gibran cocktail, because it has that just a little bit something else that just kind of says, I'm not trying to fusion, I'm not trying to re-innovate, but it's just a little bit, that one extra level of thought that says this should be served in that glass, or this should be served at that volume, or this should feel this way. That's it.
So how do I make it feel And then how do I improve it?
Yeah. How do I make it feel? And how do I make it just feel just a little bit better?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit better.
Yeah. What's your biggest challenge right now?
Gosh, my biggest challenge is definitely talent and growth. I think, when we're working with, I think every restaurant I work with, every F&B operation always say the same thing. They always say, if I just had a few more good people. And I think we are definitely lacking for talent. There's a lot of competition. A lot of the, people, especially here in Singapore, it's a small town. A lot of great ideas and a lot of great people, a lot of great diners. But the staff, I think, know that they can probably go someplace else. And so for me, it's about finding enough good talent, enough talented people who are hungry, who want to make an impact. I think that's probably everyone's challenge throughout the world. The other challenge I'm having is just, how do I continue to tell that story? How do we tell a story that not necessarily hasn't been told before, but how do we tell a story in our own unique way?
Mm.
And that is a constant struggle and challenge no matter where I am in the world.
Yeah. Just have one last question for you, Gibran. Who would you like to hear on the show?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a good question. Who would I like to hear on the show? Maybe a couple more serial entrepreneurs, guys who have been around the block a few times, had some restaurants close, had some restaurants fail. I would like to hear from some people who have really just got it wrong more than once, and then hopefully got it right. But I would like to hear more of that. So I'd like to hear some people out there in the business.
Anyone in particular?
Well, God, if I say someone now, yeah, they messed up all the time. That's really bad. But
Okay, no, you don't have to say. That's fair. That is a fair comment to make. Oh, well, definitely. There will be some more people coming up.
The next person you should definitely speak to is actually someone you should have. She hasn't failed, but she's incredible. Jordan Salcito, which is one of my great, great friends. We used to work together back at Momofuku. She's created an incredible drink called Ramona, which is like a grapefruit wine spritzer in a can. She's really, really thinking about breaking the rules of wine. She's saying, why does wine have to be in a pretty bottle and be so stoic and stuffy and buttoned up? Why can't it just be fun? And she's just an incredible human being and an inspiration in the community, a powerful sommelier, but just someone who has taken the courage, launched a cool business, and she's taken names in New York. Yeah, Jordan Salcito. Call her.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. I will definitely follow that up. And thank you very much for being on the show today, Gibran. It's been amazing having you on.
Thanks, James. See you in Singapore.
Thank you. The show today was produced by Angus Brennan. If you'd like to know more about hospopreneurs, for advice, insights, and extra content, find us at hospopreneurs.com. Thanks for listening.